Joel Topf for Nephrology Times. I'm here with Dr. Tuttle, the famous Dr. Tuttle. Super excited to be here. She's got a late-breaking clinical trial. It's going to be an oral presentation on Saturday, and she's talking about flow. And I mean, I can't get over this. We are just, my mind is still spinning with the SGLT2 revolution, and now we've got another blockbuster drug. So the top-line results of flow came out last spring. You want to remind us what that showed?
Yes, so FLOW was the first dedicated kidney outcome trial of a GLP-1 receptor agonist in persons with type 2 diabetes and high or very high risk CKD according to KDIGO criteria.
Gotcha.
So that would be a GFR as low as 25, as high as 75. The albuminuria could be as low as 100 for GFR 25 to 50. If it was over 50, they had to have 200.
Okay, but the lowest proteinuria that was enrolled in this is an ACR of 100.
Right.
Okay. Okay, and a GFR of 25 up to, you said 75?
75.
Okay, and then
93% ended up in KDIGO high or very high risk categories.
so we ended up getting the sickest of the sick.
It's the highest
high risk
group,
population, all with diabetes, and we know that the top line results showed reduced CKD, or progression of CKD, and reduced death. It was a total mortality benefit.
Right.
In this drug. But tomorrow, at the late-breaking clinical trials, you're presenting data on proteinuria and GFR tranches?
Yep, so what's new is we're now presenting the data by granular levels of CKD severity. So both GFR categories and albuminuria categories from highest to lowest.
Okay.
And the bottom line is the benefit is consistent across those groups. So in the overall population for the primary kidney outcome, which was 50% GFR decline, kidney failure, death due to kidney or cardiovascular causes, the hazard ratio was 0.76, so
Consistent with the full
24%. And then we saw the same level of risk reduction across those strategies, those strata of CKD severity, whether by GFR or albuminuria.
So, one of the things that happens with patients with high GFR or very low albuminuria is they are less likely to reach outcomes full stop. And so a lot of these studies aren't powered to hit those outcomes. Are these actually significant results, or just the point findings are on the right side of the line?
The point findings are on the right side of the line. These studies are not powered to look at all those subgroups.
Right. Of course not.
So what we look at is something called an interaction term, whether or not it's significant. So it's a statistical test to say, did the hazard ratio vary by level of kidney function in the form of GFR or kidney damage in the form of albuminuria? There is no heterogeneity. And many of the groups are individually significant.
And even there, some of them reached it, even though it's not powered for it. And I would imagine it'd be the higher risk groups, the ones with the lower GFR and the higher albuminuria. You have more events and they're more likely to cross that line, but no indication that there's less protection. And then, I know we saw in DAPA CKD, in a secondary outcome, they changed they looked at a continuous variable like slope rather than a specific one. Did you guys do any of that type of stuff?
Yes, in fact, after the primary outcome, we had a hierarchical testing strategy for major secondary outcomes.
Sure.
The first test was for GFR slope, and we met that, far exceeded the boundary for statistical significance. The difference was 1.16 mil per minute per 1.73 meters squared per year. And remember, we know from the CKD Prognosis Consortium, if that slope difference is more than 0.75, it's highly predictive of benefit of an intervention on clinical outcomes. And the p-value was...
You were 1.6, and the boundary you think is
1.16.
Which means 1.16 and 0.75 is kind of the line in the sand of what you need
We far exceeded that.
Far exceeded that.
And then the next test on the hierarchy was MACE, major adverse cardiovascular events, so non-fatal MI, non-fatal stroke, death, cardiovascular death, 18% relative risk reduction. And then finally, the third on the hierarchical test was all-cause mortality reduced 20%. Again, all highly statistically significant.
We've been using SGLT2 inhibitors coming on 10 years now, and I find them to be almost completely innocuous. The patients take the drug, they can't tell whether they're on it or off of it. The GLP-1 receptor agonist, not like that. these drugs have pretty significant GI side effects. How many people were dropping out because of intolerance in flow?
Very low. In fact, there were fewer adverse events in the semaglutide group than in the placebo group.
Really?
With one exception, and that was the GI side effects.
Sure.
But still, the discontinuation rate was slightly higher in the sema group, like 4% versus 2% versus placebo. Really quite acceptable.
So 1 in 25 people unable to tolerate.
But if you start low and go slow, that's the key there. Most people will tolerate the
And
agents.
in flow, they maxed out at 1 milligram.
Right.
So this is not some of the high doses
This
that
is
we're
not
seeing.
the weight loss dose.
No, it's really not. But there was some weight loss too.
Only about 4 kilograms on a baseline weight of about 92 kilograms. So this was not a weight loss study.
And we can't point to the weight loss as being the reason for all these remarkable
Highly
responses.
unlikely.
Highly unlikely. And we had hints because we'd seen reductions in albuminuria before this. This was not to say expected. I don't want to discount the results, but there was a reason that we went after this.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And there were also benefits on GFR slope from cardiovascular outcome trials and glycemic trials. And then now we've proven that the true clinical outcomes, not only kidney outcomes, but cardiovascular mortality outcomes, were all not only clinically reduced in a clinically relevant manner, but highly statistically significant, very rigorous and defensible results.
And so we were talking just earlier about total mortality and cardiovascular mortality in the diabetic population. You want to kind of talk a little bit about what we were saying?
Sure, and this relates to a presentation that we have here. So this is a poster presentation on Saturday. 650,000 people with diabetes.
Oh, so a small intimate study, just
followed over a
650,000,
decade.
Yeah. Only a decade of follow-up. Okay.
So there's a lot of power here.
Yeah.
And it looked across the entire range of GFR, so from the lowest to the low to normal.
Okay.
And the bottom line is this, that basically at a GFR above 30 at baseline when they enter the study, the risk of death far outpaces the risk of kidney failure. And we looked at true kidney failure events, not GFR decline events, true kidney failure events. It is only when the GFR is less than 30 that kidney failure events become more common. So what we need to recognize is in the diabetes population overall, and even in the diabetes population with CKD defined by low GFR, at least down to 30, the major risk is death. It's not kidney failure.
So what tools do we have that have been able to reduce death, right? I know the ACE inhibitors, they've not shown that, right?
So this is the real nugget here, Joel.
Yeah.
ACE inhibitors and ARBs prevent kidney outcomes, but there's been no benefit on mortality.
Yep.
In the FLOW trial, this is the first trial where the all-cause mortality benefit was tested hierarchically after the primary outcome. This is a methodologic issue, but that means you only get to test that if everything ahead of it is positive.
Right.
All-cause mortality, even though it was ranked at the end of the hierarchy, is the strongest outcome. We got all the way down through the hierarchy to the strongest outcome and had a 20% benefit on mortality.
This is FLOW, 20% reduction in total mortality.
Yes.
Wow.
All-cause mortality, indisputable outcome.
Running into buses, all cause.
That said, it was mostly reduction in cardiovascular events.
Yeah.
But we also saw reduction in infections, and we conducted this trial during COVID. There's another poster here showing that people in FLOW who received semaglutide had less COVID events and less death with COVID. I'm not saying due to COVID because we don't know.
Yeah.
But then also back to the SGLT2 inhibitor trials in DAPA-CKD, a secondary outcome, but not tested hierarchically, but still important.
Yeah.
They had about a similar reduction in mortality with SGLT2 inhibitors. So I think the punchline is we now have treatments that save kidneys, hearts, and lives. And if we think about the major risk in the patients we're treating, it's death.
Yeah.
And you only get to kidney failure if you survive. Now we have treatments that reduce the totality of risks. And in nephrology, we need to get out of the mind frame that kidney failure is the only risk we're concerned with.
Well, and I think we need to be like, when you're talking about urinary tract infections and you're talking about genital yeast infections, like, yeah, there's that risk, but you're comparing it to dying, right?
And those are usually treatable,
Oh my gosh,
manageable.
absolutely. Yeah.
And to forego a life-saving therapy
That's right.
for a relatively minor side effect seems to be counterintuitive if we value life.
You don't want the eulogy to be, but she never had a UTI.
Yes, there you go.
Hey, Dr. Tuttle, this was delightful. Hey, thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you.
Have a great meeting, and I'm
Okay.
looking forward to seeing your presentation on Saturday.
Okay, thank you.
Joel Topf for Nephrology Times.